This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Boy, do we have a great broadcast for you. Now it's time for Adam and I to take a look at the Detroit Lions and take a look at how they go from a 9-8 football team to a team that can get into the Final Four. Because right now, after watching the divisional round and you see the likes of the Bengals, you see the Eagles, 49ers, Cowboys, teams that are making their way through the playoffs, they possess some things that you are going to have in order to take the next step. And now a lot of superlatives are coming out. Pundits are discussing the Detroit Lions being highly ranked, lots of expectations, pundits saying that the Lions should be considered a Super Bowl contender in 2023. Adam and I have to break it down and look at the realistic look at this roster and where they need to improve, maybe taking some bold steps, taking a look at what the Lions need to do similar to the teams that are winning. But my goodness, got to welcome in my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski, who has also been browsing the internet and has been just as surprised at what he's been reading regarding the Detroit Lions. It's probably some of the highest praise that we've ever heard being levied against the Detroit Lions. What's up, cuz? Let's give a lot of praise to the Lions and see where this football team's at.
What's up, man? I mean, look, I don't know how you felt about this past weekend's games, but I was pretty much bored. I was bored by everything I seen. I was looking forward to that Bills-Bengals game. That game underdelivered. I was looking forward to what Philadelphia was going to do against the Giants. I thought the Giants could possess the clock and really grind them down. I thought Philly would win, but I thought it'd be a much more competitive game. It wasn't. San Francisco and the Dallas game, I mean, look, San Francisco's going to do what the 49ers are going to do, and the Cowboys are going to do what they're going to do, and Dak does what Dak does best, and that's turning the ball over. I was highly bored this entire week by these football games, so much so that I went to Twitter while these games were unfolding, and I was just kind of scrolling through, and I seen a tweet, and shame on me for not getting the person's name. If you're listening to this and I'm not giving you credit, I apologize. Let me know. Send me your name, and I will tweet you out and give you all the praise you need. But I seen a tweet where this person proclaimed that Detroit was the third best team in the NFC. Basically, after watching this weekend's games, they said that, yeah, pretty much it was Philadelphia, San Francisco, and then your Detroit Lions. That's how the team stacked up. Your Detroit Lions obviously didn't make it to the playoffs, but he says, in his estimation, the Detroit Lions were the third best team in the NFC. Do you believe that? Does that make sense to you? Because this is what I'll say. I don't think it's as far-fetched as you might think or believe. If you watch the games this past weekend, I think we can all agree that the Detroit Lions would have gave Philadelphia a better run for their money, would have gave San Francisco a better run for their money. You go back 2 weeks ago, we thought Detroit was going to basically beat every single team that was left standing except for possibly San Francisco. And honestly, what I seen from San Francisco this week didn't really make me think that the Lions couldn't contend with them. Didn't make me think that the Lions couldn't go blow for blow with them. So I don't think it's as far-fetched as it might seem. I do think that the Detroit Lions do have things going in the right direction, and I do think that they can contend with teams like the Philadelphia Eagles and the San Francisco 49ers. And if they were in this past weekend's games, would have given us a much better showing than the teams that got housed in this week's games. What do you think? Do you think that the Lions being the third best team in the NFC is so mind-blowing, so far-fetched, somebody is absolutely high out of their mind? Or are you more in line with me where, yeah, it could make sense. It could be the case.
Well, I think I now know what happened. Everybody watching got shell-shocked by Damar Hamlin's clone giving everybody the sign of the Illuminati. And
Oh, bro, you seen that stuff? That is nuts.
I went all the way up down that rabbit hole, like conspiracy theories. It's his clone. He's trying to market himself. I was like, what is going on? There's another thing. Stay tuned later on. I came across a tweet that I never thought I'd ever see from a reputable candy company that just sent me going into the thought of what are we doing here? But looking at the praise given to the Lions, no, they're not the third best NFC team. Are they a top 10 team? Yeah. Are they a playoff team? Absolutely. Are they in the mix to be one of the final four? No. Right now, where they can get to with this roster as it is right now, they're like the Cowboys. They can get a win in the postseason, and then they go up against a big dog like the 49ers, and they're going to have problems because the team like the 49ers do things exceptionally well, and they're purring. They're already 3-4 years into a regime now that is doing things at a high level. Kyle Shanahan has the experience generationally after his father was one of the greats, Super Bowl winning head coach Mike Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan just has this thing purring, and the addition of, running back McCaffrey has just made that offense really something to look at, and they're purring. And defensively, oh my gosh, that defense was stellar. It was awesome. So I look at the Lions and I say, okay, realistically, that's a playoff team. It's a team that can get to the postseason, which is great. That's the next step. But to start levying praise and talking about them being the third best, now, after the draft and we see free agency and we see who, ends up leaving and staying, look, you could theoretically, guys, and I don't want to raise alarms, but you could be losing Jamal Williams and DJ Chark off this roster. How will that look next year? Yeah, continuation's great. Having the coaches come back potentially in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn is going to be great, but this football team, as constructed, is a NFC playoff team. That's the fairest spot. But to say that they're third is a little bit hyperbolic, I think, at this time. Even though you might have been bored with what you saw a Giants team that had the capability of doing some damage against the Vikings, and they're only going to get better. You saw the teams that lost in the divisional round have some talent and also have a bright future. And you still got to contend with the Bears, who are restocking with some high-end talent. So it's fair to put the Lions in good conversation right now. But in my mind, what did you kind of take away? You were bored, obviously. You were watching. I know you would always kind of say, okay, how do the Lions compete? From what you saw from the winners, from the Bengals, from the Chiefs, Niners, and Eagles, wouldn't it just indicate that you need a couple more high-end talented people like Bradbury from the Eagles who made a play, who we always talked about bringing to Detroit because he always is around the football at key times. A cornerback that can make plays. You saw the Chiefs and what they were able to do, that side of it. And on the AFC, you see high-level AFC quarterback play with Joe Burrow, who just has a swagger, and it's just like, I'm going to show up to Buffalo, kick ass, take names, look good in my pimp suit, and walk out. That's the kind of stuff that you're looking at. But with the Lions, I think you're a high-end running back, cornerback, linebacker away, 3 to 4 players away that can contribute and stay healthy, that now we can talk about not just getting into the postseason, but getting some wins. That's where it's at. It's a legit playoff team, top 7 team, I guess, to say fairly, because that's how many teams get into the playoffs in the NFC. They're a top 5. They're 5th through 7th as constructed right now. From what you saw from the playoff teams that won, how do they get out of that realm where maybe they can get to the NFC title game in 2023?
So I think that's a great question because I was on my way into work this morning. This is just how my brain works. It's really weird and kind of messed up. But I was on my way into work this morning, and I was like, what did the teams that were basically in that Final Four group in the NFC, what did they possess that the Lions didn't possess? What do they have that the Lions don't have? And I was basically going through position by position and just trying to compare and contrast. So I think it's a fantastic question, and it just goes to show the sickness that we have here. I think what you need is you need a relatively affordable quarterback. I think all these teams have relatively affordable quarterbacks. I think the one position that you mentioned that you can kind of, I don't want to say tank, but you can go in a much more affordable option. You don't need that guy that is a high profile player. That's running back. I think if your offensive line is good enough, you can get a relatively affordable running back who's going to be productive and going to give you valuable snaps. If you look at Philadelphia, Philadelphia's got affordable guys, and they've got a guy who costs a decent amount of money, and it's the more affordable guys that are getting the job done. The Giants are basically up against it this year. They've got to make a decision on Saquon, whether or not to pay him what he's going to ask, or if they're going to go in a different direction. And Saquon really didn't do a whole lot in this playoff run. You look at San Francisco. San Francisco's got Christian McCaffrey, and then after that, it's kind of a who's who of who's healthy on that team. And honestly, I think you could get by with the who's healthy on that team. I don't necessarily think you need Christian McCaffrey to make that engine purr. And you look at Dallas. Look, Zeke, I feel like, is overpriced. I think Tony Pollard is really the straw that stirs that drink. I think Tony Pollard is probably the more of the catalyst of that offense. And once he went down in that game, it really took that offense a couple steps back. But I think you need a strong offensive line. Lions have that. You need a relatively affordable quarterback. All things in perspective, I think the Lions do have that with Jared Goff. You've got some strength at running back. You've got a decent crop of wide receivers on this team. I think you need to add another impactful defensive lineman. You obviously need to strengthen that linebacking core, so maybe one or two more pieces there. And obviously, corner is still an issue, whether it is the health of the corners or whether it is just the overall play of the corners. So if I had to rank what they need in order to get this done, I feel like the offense is almost there. I feel like the offense is almost complete. I really do feel like you need to focus on that defense. You really need to address the corner. You need to address the linebacker, and then you need to add another impactful edge or defensive lineman to put pressure on the quarterback. And that's how I would do it. That would be the order I would do it in. You got to go cornerback, you got to go linebacker, and then you've got to go defensive line. And I know the defensive line makes the cornerbacks look better, but look, you don't know what you're going to get out of Jeff Okudah. He was really banged up this year. Amani Oruwariye, he's an unrestricted free agent. I don't even want to talk to him. It really seems like things have soured, or his play has just fallen off. I'm not sure what the deal is with Oruwariye. It really, really is weird because going into this year, he was a guy who I really praised. And then the play that we've got throughout the course of the year, up until he got benched, and then even when he came back, he still looked out of sorts. I don't know if it was the scheme wasn't a right fit for him, or if he's just not a right fit for this team. It really made me question what's going on with Oruwariye. And because of that, that's part of the reason why I feel like you really need to invest heavily into that cornerback position, whether it's investing a couple of draft picks or whether it's going out signing a guy in free agency and then investing a draft pick. You've got to really help build up that secondary because it's kind of taken a beating and it didn't look really good. And I think that is where some of these more prolific offenses, Philadelphia's got a very prolific offense. When the Giants are clicking and you got Daniel Jones able to run the ball, it really does open up that pass game, and that's where they can take advantage of you. You look at Dallas. Dallas has a really good pass game when Dak isn't turning the ball over. So, again, they can take advantage of you there. San Francisco, I really do feel like George Kittle was the difference maker in their playoff game. George Kittle basically ate alive the Dallas Cowboys in the middle of that defense and really took advantage of them. That really helped set up the run. That really helped set up some of the bigger plays that took place downfield. So I think shoring up your cornerbacks and your linebacking core really does help move this team up and really does help make them that solidified third best team in the NFC.
Yeah, it was crazy. Real quick sidebar. In training camp, I was out there every day, and for whatever reason, the cornerbacks were getting picked on. Goff, and you had Tim Boyle and David Blau were just having a tremendous amount of success against Amani Oruwariye, Jeff Okudah. They struggled in training camp, and there was a recording that we did. I remember it vividly. You and I were recording, having a good time, and Pat McAfee, for whatever reason, he got in trouble for it eventually. He basically broadcast the Lions practice with the Colts. And
it's true. I remember that.
Yeah, we were sitting there and we're like, "Oh man, the Lions cornerbacks are getting torched." So I didn't even make a critique on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. I asked a question. I said, "Amani Oruwariye has not had the best training camp over the past 10 days. Are you concerned? Is anybody concerned?" And the Lions clapped back at me. One of their staffers messaged me and was like, "For someone that wasn't at the Lions Colts practice, you sure seem to have a definitive answer." And I said, look, everybody that was there said Amani Oruwariye at the Colts Lions joint practice struggled. And we were watching it. We were sitting there with our eyes, probably a better seat than you would have ever given me. I saw it with my own eyes. I was watching the Colts run right into my screen wide open because of the camera setup. So it wasn't like I said Amani Oruwariye blew. I said, are you concerned? And then all of a sudden he got benched, which was crazy. And the reason why we focused on him so much was Aaron Glenn said the next step for him was to become a shutdown corner. And it went the complete opposite direction. Penalties, it seemed like maybe the Aubrey Pleasant connection, that he was maybe took offense to the Aubrey Pleasant leaving or whatever happened. His progression halted. And not only did it halt, it went backwards. So that's where it was just distasteful to have my vision questioned because I watched it in training camp where he was getting torched. I didn't even say in the tweet that he was playing bad. I just said, are you concerned? Because he hasn't looked at the standard that he looked to close last year. And that was it. So I'm thankful that it bared out that he wasn't playing well. It went to the field. He just struggled. And you look at it, it's a key position. And you might have to allocate to a free agent and a draft pick to solidify it because Jeff Okudah, for whatever reason, started playing on special teams and started having his role diminished. Maybe he petered out or his fitness level just peaked out there at the tail end of the season, but he was getting subbed out for Mike Hughes, which is never going to be plan A. If you're the Lions, you can't sub out a number 3 pick for Mike Hughes. In no circumstance does a winning football team ever do that. And, on one of the rare occasions when we ask about Jeff Okudah, I asked specifically, like, what have you seen on film? Why is he getting benched? And, Dan Campbell went with coach speak and indicated that they had plans to get Mike Hughes more reps, and they're happy with Okudah getting some reps on special teams. And I was like, okay, that caught everybody's attention.
That's never the case.
Yes, not the case. I was like, okay, that must have been a really good question there because, it's not looking good for Jeff Okudah right now. But, hopefully with another offseason, he's a good number 2. It's a good start. Jerry Jacobs, good start, 2A. Now you need your number 1. You need a number 1 lockdown guy.
Look, for me, with Amani Oruwariye, again, a guy who I was huge on going into this year, a guy who I really thought was going to take that next step, and he was going to be your number 1 guy.
Yes.
Okudah was going to be a close number 2 if everything worked out the right way for me. And it didn't happen. It really seems like it is all between the ears, and it seems like once he got benched, he kind of checked out, and then he just never really regained that form that he needed to take over his spot again. So I don't expect him to be back with this team next year. I do expect him to go someplace else, and I do expect him to make an impact on a different team, just not here. And it'll be interesting to kind of see how his career ends up developing. But he was a huge disappointment for me. He was a guy who I invested a little bit in, and I expected a lot, and I didn't get any of it.
If I'm him,
it'll be interesting to kind of see what takes place.
Yeah, if I'm him or his agent, I try to get to the 49ers or the Jets because I think those two teams would develop a cornerback, maybe a new
The Jets was the team I was thinking he would end up going to and having the most success. So interesting you say the Jets.
Yeah, because they have a defensive coach that can probably get the most out of him. And you see combining him with Sauce Gardner where there's no pressure, I think that he could fit right in there and just a rejuvenation. Sometimes it just plays out that way. Off the field issues or whatever's going on potentially just caused, because when a player, it's fine if a player stagnates, but when a player regresses, that's quite noticeable, especially when your defensive coordinator is a defensive coach. That's something was a former defensive back in the National Football League. That's really alarming. So I look at it, and you say that you want most players to at least stay the same in your program, and for a couple of players not to have that happen, you got to look at that position, and they will. I do think they understand talent at this point, but I do got to ask you because we heard it. It's not going to make big news across town, but it was reported by the Detroit News that Dave Sears, the head of scouting, college scouting, worked real close. Now, he wasn't hired by Brad Holmes, but he was a holdover and has been really, really solid in regards to the last couple of drafts. He oversaw college scouting. All of the scouts and the area scouts had to report that we're looking at college players to Dave Sears. He's now with the Arizona Cardinals. Does that concern you at all? But I don't think so because it just gives Brad Holmes an opportunity to get another one of his guys in there. But it is a loss from your organization to another NFL team. He goes from college scouting director to become assistant GM with the Cardinals. Are you concerned at all?
So I look, this is what happens, right? When you become a good team, and it's a good thing. It's a good sign. It sucks, but it's a good sign when people are wanting to interview your assistant coaches, and those coaches are going on interviews and they're getting offered jobs, or they're number one or number two in the running for those positions. And then you have your front office basically getting poached and guys going and taking different positions like assistant general managers of different teams. These are all really good things. I don't necessarily know if it hurts this team, like if it's a crippling blow. I feel like if you would have lost Ben Johnson, that would have been a little bit of a crippling blow for this team. You end up losing Dave Sears. I think this team can make adjustments and it'll be fine. Yes, it's a loss, but I don't think it's a monumental blow to that front office. I feel like trying to keep your coaching staff core intact, I think that is what is most important right now. As far as the front office goes, I feel like Brad Holmes has a pretty good eye for finding the guys to help him get the talent that he needs. I think this is one of those things also where this guy moves on. You have another good relationship with somebody else in the organization who was underneath him. You get to promote up, and you can bring another person in to fill that role. So I think they're in a good spot, and I think this is a good sign. When was the last time you can talk about guys from Detroit's front office
going around the league
to other teams?
Yep.
I mean, the last person I can think of, it was the former Pittsburgh general manager. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. He just retired, I think, last year or 2 years ago. But that was the last time. That was a guy who was here, and I believe he was underneath Mayhew, ended up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers and really helped mold them and help them win a couple Super Bowls. So that was the last person I can recall. This is normally where coaches and front office personnel kind of come to die. So I think it's a really good sign.
Yeah, Kevin Colbert.
I think it's a real good sign.
Kevin Colbert, who retired long. Yes, he was great. He was widely regarded as a great talent evaluator. And look what's happened. I mean, the Steelers, when you really look at it, how on earth do you have a head coach in Mike Tomlin who has never had a losing season in 15 NFL seasons? I think that's probably one of the most downplayed stories in the history of football. 15 years, beyond the length of this project that we started, beyond the length of many NFL teams in terms of keeping coaches. There's some teams that have probably 6-7 total head coaches in that same time span. And to have Mike Tomlin, huge kudos to that front office for sticking with it. Only having 3 coaches in the history, in the modern era, that it's just ridiculous. And that's what you're starting to see. It is very nuts. Underrated that even though they turn over, bring in rookie quarterbacks, and they came down from several games under 500 to finish the year 9-8, just out of the playoffs. The future's bright there. They'll be right back in the postseason. It just goes to show you.
And look, that was a quarterback that it was a little bit divisive. Like, there were people who were totally out on him. There were people who were in on him. And look, Pittsburgh, where was Kenny Pickett drafted? Wasn't Kenny Pickett drafted in like the 3rd round? Or was he wasn't a first round? No, he was a first round pick. He was a later first round pick. But it was one of those things where a lot of people were like, no, no, no. Other people were like, yeah, probably. It was really, really weird. And they go out, they get the guy, and there were some growing pains. But again, you finished the season 9-8, just on the outside of the playoffs looking in, and you had a shot with a rookie quarterback. I mean, that says a ton about an organization. And look, I think that's a good segue into this next topic that we've got. We've got a lot of mock drafts flying around, and you're seeing a lot of different things, and it's causing a lot of different reactions, similar to Kenny Pickett when he was drafted. How would you feel about Detroit using early picks on offense, whether it be possibly moving up to grab the quarterback of the future, possibly spending it on a tight end? We've discussed the offensive line being a strength. There's going to be some turnover there, possibly adding an interior offensive lineman or maybe even a tackle, possibly using it. You mentioned a high-profile running back a little bit earlier. So lots of options here that this team could go in with one of their first 2 picks in the first round, or even they could use a couple of their picks in the second round. How do you feel about Detroit using early picks on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, and now it goes to show you, to perfectly segue from the last talk that we had, I trust Brad Holmes. So outside of a tight end, I wouldn't be upset even if they took a wide receiver, if they took an offensive player. For me, and to play it right down the middle, I think in the first round, obviously most people are thinking defense, but obviously some of the the things that happened last year. I mean, Brad Holmes was willing to trade within the division and move up to get Jamison Williams. Now, it was in a big area of need. It's a skill position. So for me, I think the best thing you could do because of the nature of the high-end talent, it's not going to be offense, but I would not be opposed to any combination of offense-defense with the first 2 picks. I think that I wouldn't even be upset if they went and they saw the quarterback that they felt is the guy. If it's Anthony Richardson, if it's Will Levis, if they believe that they do their due diligence and they find an offensive player. Now, I would like somebody that's going to start right away. So for me, I would take a chance and maybe take a swing and draft potentially Breezy or Miles Murphy, maybe take a situation and look at trading down, getting more picks. But if you stay at 6, you get an impactful defensive player. And if you feel like Bijan Robinson is the guy, he's the workhorse, he's the Jonathan Taylor, which he's being projected to be based on his size, frame, and what he can do, he arguably is the best running back in the draft. I take him. And you solidify that offense. Oh my gosh, you think of DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, and Bijan Robinson, 1-2-3 combination. If you can bring them all back, maybe it softens the blow if Jamal Williams gets a massive deal somewhere else. You get a workhorse in Bijan Robinson behind that offensive line, that transition's pretty quick. You get probably a 700-yard rookie season out of him right away and an impactful force. So I'm not opposed to it. I think everybody's kind of locked in to the belief that you have to have defense, but you just saw, guys, remember, don't be a creature of the moment. Remember last year, Malcolm Rodriguez, Kirby Joseph, James Houston, people that are now considered the core of your team, drafted in rounds 3 and beyond. So Brad Holmes at this time has earned the trust to make whatever decision he wants. And knowing that your offense is right there, there's nothing wrong, guys, with going from above average to elite. So even if he went offense, and then went defense heavy the next 3-4 picks, you guys got to remember, he has more than 2 picks. Yeah, we focus on the high-end players in the mock drafts, but pretty soon, all Lions and all the other mock drafts as well, they're going to start putting out complete mock drafts. And you're going to see probably heavy defense, probably 60 to 70% of the players be on defense, but there's nothing wrong with making your offense elite. Nothing wrong with still, maybe Jared Goff walks in there and says, I want this receiver. He fits what I like. I want him. Maybe he finds someone, maybe he likes that running back. Maybe he likes that tight end. Maybe there's somebody that he likes that's going to make the offense purr. So with that said, I am not opposed in any way, shape, or form with one of the first couple picks being on offense. I think common sense would indicate you don't do that because of how bad your needs are on defense. But Brad Holmes has earned my trust that he can make up for it later on, especially with the interior of the defensive line. You can find some beef and a culture guy. You can do it through free agency. You can find a key linebacker. Bottom line, it's going to be good because I know help is coming. But I'm, not opposed to being a little sexy in the first round and looking at a stud offensive player.
How would you feel if they did like a draft and stash, similar to what they did with J-Mo this year, where they use a pick?
No.
Whether it's the early first round or whether it is the later first round pick, they go and they draft that quarterback of the future and they stash him because obviously Jared Goff's going to be your quarterback for the next.
Correct.
I'm going to say the next 2 years. But what if they went out and they got that guy and they just basically put him on the bench? You just keep him on ice. Let him learn, let him develop a little bit.
Yeah, only at the quarterback spot. That's it. Everything else, if the position player has to play. No. Quarterback's the only spot where if you think that's the guy, because Jared Goff is a perfect leader. You give him 2 more years. The hope is that he continues to stay healthy. This quarterback doesn't have to see the field. They can take the heat, and they won't succumb to someone like me screaming, put him out there, put him out there. The only way you'd see the field is if Jared Goff got hurt. It's perfect. It's a perfect scenario. Jared Goff has to teach the next guy because he embodies everything this organization would like. Professional, nice, clean cut. And then you teach a young rookie how to watch film, be professional, handle the ups and downs, make the key throws. And then when he comes in a couple years, he's ready to go. So the only position I would stash would be quarterback. But, man, I do think that, just based on how these mock drafts are going, the interior of the defensive line looks like a good spot. And looks like SEC country is getting a lot of love from the Lions, which would be Breezy. It stinks because you know how unlucky the Lions are that the Rams lost. It makes you number 6. And it stinks because you're just on the outside of Jalen Carter, Will Anderson. You're just on the outside in most mock drafts. You have to hope that a team jumps up ahead of you for a quarterback that could further pushing everybody down.
Well, see, this is what I also think sucks, right? So you're in that spot where you're just outside of the top 3 quarterbacks, right? So the way the draft will probably go or possibly go is you've got your top 3 quarterbacks, and you've got those 2 elite defensive guys. So those will go in the top 5, and then you're kind of left behind there. Whereas if you maybe had that 5th pick and say CJ Stroud or Will Levis was still around there, you could have a team want to trade up with you. You could move back a couple of spots and pick up some more draft capital either for next year or for this year and really be in a decent spot. So you're right. Where they're at, it does kind of hurt, but it hurts for a couple of different reasons. You're kind of out on that first mix of ultra talented guys, like the defensive guys who will make an immediate impact. And then you're out on those possible future quarterbacks as well. And it leaves you in this almost no man's land where you're going to need somebody to see something that you don't see and go up and move or want to move up to grab that guy. And hopefully like CJ Stroud or Will Levis falls to you and you can get a team like maybe Carolina, maybe a team like Atlanta, maybe another team wanting to move up to grab that quarterback of the future if they're still there. So they're in a really interesting spot. I don't think it's as detrimental as you make it, but it definitely would be much better if they were 5 and above. But it'll be what it is. And I look, I do trust Brad Holmes to make the right decision. I personally don't want them to use early picks on offense. I believe this team is in a position where they can make some noise next year, and they can possibly get that playoff win. They can host a playoff game. I think they're in line to win the division right now. I do not trust what's going on in Green Bay. I don't believe in Minnesota. And look, I think the scariest team in your division is the Chicago Bears. I think they've got a lot to work on with Justin Fields, but they've got a lot of cap space, and they're in a position where if they believe in their quarterback that they have, they can move backwards and they can acquire much more draft capital, not just for this year, but for next year, a position that I almost wish Detroit was in. So I think they're in a really good spot. All of that being said, I would prefer them to go defense, and I would prefer them to, if they're going to take that flyer, take that shot on a quarterback, I would prefer them to do it much later. I would prefer them to do it similar to something like the 49ers did with Brock Purdy. You took a flyer on a guy in the 7th round. And look, you can't tell me that the San Francisco 49ers, when they're in their draft room and they're like, yeah, this guy's going to be great. This guy has the Tom Brady code written all over him. Let's take him in the 7th round. Let's plug him in. He's going to lead us to the NFC Championship game where he might actually win the damn thing and then get us into the Super Bowl. There's no way that the 49ers forecasted that. The 49ers took a chance on a guy. He made it through training camp. He was a guy who seemed to really understand the offense, and he's developed. And they've done a good enough job insulating him, similar to what you do with Jared Goff. I would love for the Lions to go out and basically find their Brock Purdy. Go out, invest a late-round pick into a guy, get him here, let him train under Jared Goff, sit underneath that tutelage tree, pick up a couple of things, learn some stuff, really develop and understand the offense, and you keep him well insulated and you keep him protected. And that way, if for some reason, break glass in case of emergency, Jared Goff gets hurt in the next year or two, you've got this guy that you can throw out there and he's going to perform. He's going to give you that Brock Purdy-esque winning mentality. He's going to give you those dubs. That would be the hope, right? But it comes down to, do you trust Brad Holmes to find the Lions their next Brock Purdy? So I'm going to throw it to you quickly. Do you believe that Brad Holmes has the makings and the ability to find that next late-round quarterback, to find that next Brock Purdy, to find basically the diamond in the rough, that little golden nugget that everybody else passed on for 6-7 rounds, and you just happen to take a flyer on him, and he turns out to be basically pocket aces for you. And next thing you know, you've got an ace on the flop, and then you've got an ace on the river, and you're sitting there with 4 aces, and you're going to win the whole damn pot. Do you believe Brad Holmes is the guy to be able to do that? And do you see Brad Holmes investing one of those later round picks in a guy to hopefully become the Lions' Brock Purdy?
Yeah, you're building everything the way in which it would appear a player could come in and have success with an offensive line, with a running game, with an elite wide receiver. Yeah, who's to say that the Lions couldn't go out even and get a talented free agent to play the quarterback position at the backup spot? I think that when you look at what the Lions are looking to do, they're looking to solidify each and every room, each and every unit. And obviously, Brad Holmes said that he wants to make the backup quarterback a point of emphasis. I do think that you're going to have to draft somebody. I don't think you go the entire 2023 draft without looking at the backup spot. And then maybe it's Nate Sudfeld again to back up because he's been here now. He understands the whole season. He's been through everything with Jared Goff. So maybe you roll with Nate Sudfeld. Maybe you bring in and allocate a couple free agent dollars to the likes of a Sam Darnold and you have him potentially ready. But it goes to show you that what would happen if the Lions are in the playoffs and Jared Goff goes down for one series? How much trust would you have in Nate Sudfeld to go out there and lead you on a 98-yard drive to get you 7 points? You know, so you look at it and you realize that the Lions are being built in a way that, allows for players to come in and have success. But the quarterback spot is the biggest spot. It's the biggest key. It's not as easy to just plug and play a Brock Purdy into a team. But when you have a good running game, when you have good wide receivers, you see the 49ers and great coaching, you see what the potential can be. But yeah, obviously the Lions have to seriously address backup quarterback, and they will. Absolutely, they will. It'll be something that is addressed. When Brad Holmes says point of emphasis, that means it's going to be locked down, taken care of. So when I see it, I think that when you talk about it, it means it's going to get done, and you probably can seriously consider upgrading from Nate Sudfeld.
Yeah, look, I think that quarterback room needs help, right? Nate Sudfeld, not necessarily the guy to really help. He's not adding a level of competition there, right? What I would love for the Lions to do, and I don't know if they're going to do it, but what I would love for them to do, go out, find a journeyman quarterback who can come in and make the room a little bit more competitive. A guy, we'll say like Brian Hoyer, right? Brian Hoyer, he's basically a journeyman quarterback in the league. He's a guy who can come here. He can give you a game or two. He might keep you in contention, might help you win it. Obviously, the big name free agent who you could possibly go out and get as a backup quarterback, and I'd have to look to see if he is a free agent. I shouldn't say he is a free agent. Is Case Keenum. Case Keenum is a guy who can give you minutes, can help win you a game, can possibly win you 3 or 4 games if you need it. So you go out and find your Case Keenum, bring him here, and then you go out and you draft that quarterback. You use one of those later round picks on that quarterback and bring them in, and then you have that quarterback room be a real strength of this team. Look, you don't need to. You don't have to spend a ton of money on that room. You've already got Jared Goff, who's your guy, but you go out and you pay a guy a couple $1 million, and then you bring in another guy on off that late round draft pick, and you just help put him in that room with that knowledge and watch him grow. And the hope is that you sign whoever your backup quarterback is. Look, Jared Goff's got about 2 years left on his contract. So we're just going to go under the estimation that Jared Goff's going to be here for at least the next 2 years. I'm not trying to move him out, but this is how my mind's working if I'm trying to construct this team, and we're looking to win now. The way I look at it is we've got at least a 2-year window here. So I've got Jared Goff for the next 2 years. I go out and I get a guy like a Case Keenum, right? I sign him to a 3, maybe a 4-year deal. So now I've got that high caliber backup. So if anything bad was to happen to Jared Goff, we're protected. But I also have him in the room with my new quarterback who I'm bringing along, who I'm grooming, who at some point will take the reins. And if for some reason something crazy was to happen, you can look at San Francisco, what happened with Trey Lance. Something crazy was to happen, you could turn to that higher end backup quarterback to really help soften that blow and really kind of ease some of those growing pains and ease some of the problems that you might run into. Now, I don't know if Brad Holmes is going to be able to get it done with a 7th round pick, right? I don't even know if the Lions have a 7th round pick. I'm actually pulling up their picks right now to see what all they actually do have. I wouldn't be opposed to Brad Holmes using one of the 3rd round picks that this team has. I believe they've got a 5th round pick, and I believe they've got a 6th round pick. I wouldn't be opposed to him using one of those picks. Yeah, I don't think they have a 7th round pick. How early is too early for the Detroit Lions to use a draft pick, in your estimation, for that quarterback of the future? Is the third round too early? I think that's, what is it? Pick 81 is what I think they have.
Yeah, it's too early. In terms of trading capital and things like that, I don't know. I feel like the Lions covet capital and are not looking to deduct it. They might be willing to make trade deals that involve pick swaps where it's 1 for 1, 2 for 2, all those kind of things. But I just have a hard time seeing the Detroit Lions take away because the team needs so many pieces at so many different spots. Even in the offensive line, you need a guard, you need depth pieces. Taylor Decker still getting up there in age, so you need to look at potentially the left tackle of the future. So I'm looking at one free agent, one caliber quarterback where if it's not high end, then you got to find somebody, maybe 5th round, 6th round. You got to look and find the guy that maybe whatever reason, maybe it's Duggan who people miss out on. You got to find your Tom Brady. I mean, I'm not talking about Hall of Fame pick here this year, but you got to find somebody that can come in and play. And that's why it goes to show you, many people believe, and I do too, you should just draft a quarterback every year in a draft, every year, and you can just whack them off. Every single year, draft somebody in the 4th round. Take a chance until you find somebody.
What are you doing with these quarterbacks?
Whack them. Take them out. If they're not good.
You're whacking them off, huh?
Yeah, I'm whacking them off. If they're not playing, then they're out, pervert. I'm talking about in terms of cutting their contract. I don't care what their sexual proclivities are. I'm talking about cutting their contract where they walk into, Brad Holmes' offense like, you ain't cutting it, you're done. So I'm hoping that the Lions do that every single time, but they don't. They've I know protected Jared Goff, but even Goff needs to feel like, hey, if something were to happen to me, I roll my ankle for a play or two, you really want Nate Sudfeld out there, behind you, getting your team to win. Sometimes you got to count on some teammates. Look at Chad Henne. The dude's 55 years old, still slinging it in the NFL. And you saw him lead a 98-yard drive. I mean, kudos to him playing football, damn near 60 years old and still around and still doing things. I remember him back in the John Navarre, Chad Henne days. But in all seriousness, you look at the Lions, it's just basically Brad Holmes said it. He's like, okay, he told his people, look, we can't fix every position, every draft, but this one, we're focusing on the quarterback position. So, however, you got to trust the development of the scouting department to find somebody in later rounds because you need talent. You need linebackers. You need positions that will strengthen this team. Maybe there's a linebacker. There's a wide receiver that is out there that could potentially do it. So I do got to ask you this, though, because you mentioned his name. Trey Lance, probably, if you're hearing the tea leaves, if you're reading them, maybe he's on his way out. Do you roll if you're San Francisco? Is plan A Purdy and you have Trey Lance, who's a high draft pick there? That doesn't seem to fly in regards to building a football team. I'm sensing that maybe the 49ers could want to flip Trey Lance. Do you take a chance on him? Because it just seems like you haven't seen enough of him out on the field to make that investment. It's probably going to take some high capital. But maybe you take a chance and see if a third rounder gets him here. I would be willing to do it for Trey Lance. He's got the mobility. And here's the part that is just, it scares a lot of people, is people don't want to trade capital for somebody that has an injury history. But if you trust in Jared Goff and you trust in Ben Johnson, then they should be able to develop Trey Lance into somebody that can potentially be something. I mean, it's an investment. It's a risk. And if you're good, then you just trade somebody. You trade DeAndre Swift for that same third round pick, and you make up for it. So it's not like catastrophic. Now, if you do a 2023 first, and then you do another first in next year's draft, and you're gambling a little too much in terms of giving up capital, I wouldn't do it. But I would do it. I don't think it's that prohibitive because I think right now the 49ers are desperate. They have to kind of alleviate some of the tension in that room because there's no way Trey Lance is going to want to be known as the guy that lost his job to the last pick in a draft. No way that flies. I don't care if you're the utmost professional. My ego wouldn't be able to handle that. I'd be like, get me out of here. Period. If I don't care, I'm walking right to the media and I'm like, I'm finding the John Macaroon of podcasts and I'm like, John Lynch is great, but he sold me a bill of goods. I think that organization is great with Brock Purdy, but I need to find my way. Get me out of here. And you get yourself out of there. You can't stay in that position where your job has been handed over to somebody that it kind of seems like the offense has been tailor-made for?
I mean, I guess, right? But at the same point, what do you do with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Like, are you trading Jimmy Garoppolo too? Because I don't think he's a free agent at the end of this year. So, I mean, I'd have to look at what's going on in San Francisco. If I'm Trey Lance, I think I go into next year thinking I'm winning my job back. And look, competition's going to rise to the top. All that being said, I'm not necessarily opposed to trading for Trey Lance if the Detroit Lions see something in him and they think they can develop whatever it is that they see. Trey Lance was a guy a couple years ago I wasn't huge on. I didn't necessarily think the world of him. I mean, we were coming out of a COVID college football season. I believe he played one game, and the one game that he played was so he could showcase his talents. And I think he did a good enough job. But all that being said, I don't think I've really seen a whole lot from him since he's come into the league. And I know it's been very limited playing time, and then he gets hurt. So I understand all of that. So to me, it comes down to two things. Does this organization believe he's the guy of the future and they can build around him and use the team that they are facilitating right now, and he can come in and make it better and do everything that they're going to ask him? And two, what does it cost? Because I'm not willing to give them a first-round draft pick for him. I'm not willing to give them a second-round draft pick for him because I haven't seen enough. Now, depending on where that third-round draft pick is, we could maybe have a conversation. I'm more inclined to give them fourth, fifth, maybe a sixth-round draft pick. And I don't know if they're willing to take that. I don't know if they want that. I do understand what you're saying because in that room, you now have three potential starters, whether it be Jimmy Garoppolo, whether it be Brock Purdy, or whether it be Trey Lance. And these are all guys who at one point this season have held that starting role. I think if I'm the 49ers, and this is a great spot to be in, right? I think if I'm the 49ers, I'm going with Brock Purdy, and I'm going to stick with Jimmy Garoppolo, and I will then try to move on from Trey Lance. I will then try to package Trey Lance and get something back for that return. And look, that could be one of those. If you're not a strong organization, you go back and you look at everything they gave up to move up to get that guy, and you're going to turn around. You're going to basically sell him for pennies on the dollar. It's absolutely crazy. A weaker organization that would absolutely cripple you. But you're a good organization. Somehow you have three legit starting quarterbacks, right? Banana boats. You can trade one of them. Again, you're going to sell them for pennies on the dollar, but at least get some type of return on that investment, and you just kind of move forward. But if I'm the Detroit Lions, I would inquire. I would call. And again, I would have this conversation with my coaching staff, kind of see where they're at, kind of gauge the temperature of the room and see if this is the guy who we believe can help facilitate our future. If that's the case, I need to know what they're looking for as far as compensation. I'm not willing to give a whole ton. And if they wanted to do a straight up trade, or they wanted to do a trade and I throw in an extra draft pick, I would give them DeAndre Swift, and here's a 6th round pick. Go ahead, take it. Let's go.
And here's another advanced level move here. Let's say they're willing to take a 4th round pick. You get Trey Lance. Now a team like the Colts, who they have plan A, that quarterback goes down, and you then lob a call next year to the Colts. Say, hey, give me 2 seconds, and you can have Trey Lance. Now you've taken a 4th round investment and turned it into 2 seconds. So that's how you can also play chess too, where you're not really making it so that you even want to invest in them. You just want to have them potentially for that one shot a quarterback goes down on a team that's in a playoff push, and now you flip it for 2 second-rounders. Now you're playing really advanced draft chess and can help your organization. At the same time, you have to assume that with an offensive line, a nice running back, and an elite wide receiver, that can potentially make Trey Lance your Brock Purdy. That's how you do it, is that you believe that you can pretty much get anybody to run the game for you when the system is right. And that's what you're building. That's what we want. That's what I've always wanted, is to have the ability. Because it's not Brock Purdy. Come on, he's the last pick in the draft. Nick Saban told him, you got a weak arm, you're not that good, you're this and that. Now, is that accurate? No, I'm sure he's got competitive spirit and things like that. But part of the reason Brock Purdy's playing well is he's got Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Nick Bosa. You got George Kittle. You ain't giving this guy scrubs to throw to. Do you see that catch that George Kittle made? The dude basically stuck his big, huge paw out there, made a catch, and then flexed to the camera. So that would allow a lot of teams and a lot of quarterbacks to have success. So if you're building it that way and you have that ability to do it, do it. See if you can flip it for. But you're right. If you're the 49ers, you might just gamble and just say, fuck it, we'll just take both of them, let them compete with each other, and we still got Trey Lance under control for many more years. So we'll see how it plays out, but it's interesting. But it goes to show you that the move has to be made. It has to be upgraded. The backup quarterback position is a point of emphasis. It will be upgraded. And when the Lions upgrade the defense, and they upgrade the backup quarterback, and they upgrade the offensive line, and they keep building, because there's going to be 6 more players potentially who I think at least 3 or 4 are going to play well. And now you have Aiden Hutchinson in his second year, James Houston, Kirby Joseph. This is how you maximize 2-3 great draft classes. This is a big draft class. This is a huge offseason for the Lions, and it could set them up for success, not only in 1 year in 23, it could be 23, 24, 25, if it works out and you hit on this draft. It's a big draft, big free agency period. I've loved this conversation. I love the idea of playing GM, looking at how the Lions compare to the teams. All right, I need your prediction. Who's going to play in the Super Bowl? For me, I think the best Super Bowl is Cincinnati, and it's a repeat of a Super Bowl that happened here in Detroit. Cincinnati 49ers is a legit Super Bowl. Cincinnati Eagles also would be fun too, but Cincinnati's got to get to the dance.
I think Eagles Cincinnati would be so much fun. You got 2 outstanding young quarterbacks that one are incredibly interesting and fun to watch play. I think you have 2 teams that are built the way you're hoping your Detroit Lions build, right? You've got weapons on the outside. You've got defenses that can punish the other team. You've got impactful players all over the place. For me, I think Eagles Cincinnati would be a fantastic Super Bowl. It'll be really interesting to kind of see how this week plays out. I'm hoping for some better games than we got this last week, though. That's for sure.
They're coming. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast as we follow the Lions offseason. Now things are slowed down for a couple of weeks, but you got the Senior Bowl this next week. We'll peek into that next week as well. So make sure you stay tuned to the Detroit Sports Podcast Network and at Detroit Podcast on Twitter as we bring you great audio content, broadcasts, analysis, opinions, and some entertaining audio podcasts. Thanks, everybody. This podcast comes to a close. Podcasting time coming to an end for this week's episode. Make sure to subscribe anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcast. Just type in 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Thanks, everybody, for downloading the latest edition of Doc and Jock.